Hey, good afternoon. It's Sabine. It is almost sundown on the 9th of September already. And yesterday, the new moon was sighted over Jerusalem by multiple witnesses, meaning that the Feast of Trumpets, according to the standards of Leviticus 23 for all the lunisolar calendars, has started. And on the solar calendars, we're ending the Feast of Pentecost, the Feast of the Wood Offerings. And these two pictures are going to both play out in the heavens. And I'm convinced that the Lord uses multiple calendars. So yesterday, we've already briefly covered that the moon is going to be birthed out of Virgo today. And this beautiful alignment with Vesta, the Virgins, Venus, the David bride type, and Spica, the branch, the rod of iron, which is going to be given to the bride to both minister during the end times harvest and rule and reign in the millennium. That is going to be followed up because the sign doesn't stop here. And today is also the commemoration of the birth of the planet Jupiter at the exact same spot 4 years ago when it was birthed out of Virgo before the culmination of the Revelation 12 sign, September 23rd and 24th. And that sign didn't end in Virgo. It ended with the moon underneath Virgo's feet, heading onward to the altar of redemption. And the Lord told us that our redemption would be drawing nigh and we would see it. So, September 10th, the moon will conjunct with Venus to then pass under Virgo's feet and enter into the constellation Libra, the altar of redemption, reflecting how Jesus purchased us at the highest cost. And this is where she will complete her monthly redemption cycle in the heavens, reminiscent of our promised redemption drawing nigh. And on our way, on our bridal walk on the highway of holiness, remember it went from Jerusalem all the way to Giza. We are living as a living sacrifice. We are putting ourselves on the altar. Libra is also the celestial entryway of the pyramid in the heavens, just like the Giza bridal witness in stone on earth, awaiting her capstone, her Redeemer, her Lord, the cornerstone of the entire structure, to complete her. And in our mind's eye, if we look at the image below, can we see a veiled young moon bride being escorted by the Father, by the Spirit and the Word, to find her kinsman Redeemer right where she's reminded of when and where he departed, while expressing her eternal love for her. And I was reminded this morning when I was a little girl and I would look for things. My dad would always say, well, they're just in the same spot where you left them. And that answer didn't really help me until I found it. And then, of course, he was always right. And I was reminded of him today and thinking that maybe Jesus in the heavens is also where he left us at the cross. And the altar of redemption is a symbol of his crossway and the ultimate price he paid as a sacrificial lamb. And maybe that's where we're going to find him. 1 Chronicles 16:29. We're going to see our redemption drawing nigh, and we're reminded of his offering on the altar and the joy set before us. 1 Chronicles 16:29. Give unto the Lord the glory due unto his name. Bring an offering and come before him. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. On the right-hand side, we see this image from the backside of the father and the groom as she is led into the church toward the altar. And at the altar is where she finds her groom. And this is where we find the moon today. She's going to be birthed out of Virgo, out of the woman, out of the body of Christ. She's going to walk on the altar, on the aisle, toward the altar. And she's going to progress on the ecliptic, on the aisle, the highway of holiness, toward the altar, the biblical altar of redemption in Libra, now known as scales, the scales of judgment, but in ancient days, in biblical times, it was the four-cornered altar where the Lord reminds us he paid the ultimate price on our behalf. And right above, we can see the crown of the bride that the serpent wants to seize from her. It is the missing capstone. But due to the overcoming bride, as well as the restrainer flanking the moon, the crown is hers, and she's not going to give it away. This is also the location, the moon in Libra, the restrainer next to her, is also the location of the heavenly pyramid. So as the moon is entering into Libra, she's actually entering into the heavenly representation of the bridal witness in stone. The capstone, the crown, Corona Borealis, is right above her. And just like Libra in the heavens, with four corners, four angles, and a ramp leading toward the altar, we see a depiction of an ancient biblical altar with four horns on the corners, and the sacrifice to be put in the middle thereof. And here we see the four-cornered pyramid, the altar and witness in stone, just like Isaiah spoke of in the scriptures, on the border of Upper and Lower Egypt, the representation of the bride in Christ, and the end, the finish line of the highway of holiness by Isaiah 2. We covered that before. The bride is clothed in him. She is glorious, without spot or wrinkle, and adorned in the Spirit, as a final preparation before meeting her groom. The Lord's jewels are also mentioned in Malachi 3:16-18, where we read she will come back in the end times harvest as well. Then they that feared the Lord spake often to one another, and the Lord hearkened and heard it, and a book of remembrance was written before him for them that feared the Lord, and that taught upon his name. And they shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts, in that day when I make up my jewels, and I will spare them, as a man spareth his own son that serveth him. Then shall ye return and discern between the righteous and the wicked, between him that serveth God and him that serveth him not. So the Lord is going to extend his authority to the bride, and a part of the bride is going to return as end times harvesters. And the bride of Christ during the millennium will be given the authority to rule and reign with him. And we can see a type of this bridal co-regent in the book of Esther, who was given the seal, the ruling seal, and authority to rule with King Xerxes. And she delegated part of her authority to Mordecai. The bride at the altar. What I believe we're going to see on September 11th, and mirror of what we see in our modern day churches when the bride walks up the aisle accompanied by the father, and it's at the altar that she meets her groom. September 11th, the veiled moon will be positioned right in the middle of the altar Libra. Underneath her victor's crown, Corona Borealis with the serpent could not cease from her. She's an overcomer bride. She will appear larger than normal that day because she is closest to the earth, which is called at perigee. The restrainer and divine helper Ophiuchus is flanking her on the left side, keeping the enemy at bay and leading the bride safely to her groom. So when the enemy is most nigh, the head of the serpent above her, the sting of the scorpion to her left, that's when the restrainer is closest by. The moon's placement on the altar is also in perfect sync with the Essenes' final day of wood offering for the Jerusalem temple altar, which closes the Pentecost feast cycle. This day reflects the completion and the sanctification of the Lord's summer harvest. So it's the end of the harvest. Pentecost fully come. The earth's altar appears to be readied unto sacrifice as well. awaiting the first heavenly calls, the embers, to be thrown down by the Lord himself, because he is the only one without sin, and thus the only one eligible to judge those in harlotry by casting a first stone. This monthly lunar cycle of bridal redemption, because we see this cycle every month. This month, it is going to happen on a special Sabbath. The picture of her becoming a living sacrifice unto like-mindedness and reunification with her groom is completed on a very special day, because it's the day that we commemorate the Lord's own birth, 9/11/3 BC. And of course, the enemy has made a vain attempt to overshadow that day, to mark it, to hijack it for their nefarious purposes, to bring down the two towers, the two pillars, the two strands of DNA, the strong tower of Jesus himself, but also the watchtower of the flock where he was born, the Migdal Eder, represented by Mary Magdalene, the tower where the sacrificial lambs were being kept. That was where he was born to become that sacrificial lamb, to die on that altar. But regardless of what the enemy tries to do, the Lord's light pierces through the enemy's darkness always. And 9/11 is not a day of the enemy. It is a day of the Lord, who came to the world when the world was at its darkest. And I propose September 11th is also the day of the commemoration of the disciples handpicking the crop of the new kingdom, authorized by the Lord of the Sabbath, the source of peace, speaking to us that in him we will find our heavenly rest. And as he went on to heal on that Sabbath, we are looking forward to find the Prince of Peace, the full healing of our heavenly transformation, and I hope that will be the Sabbath as well. And from the perspective of the wayward and the lost, we understand that the Lord will come as a thief for those who are not watching, dividing them from those that abide in him and serve his kingdom purposes. So will the bride, those who have been fashioned into his image by the Spirit and the Word, will they be born into heaven this Sabbath to be offered as a birthday gift from the Father to his Son? It is a third day we are called to be ready by, and the day on the lunar calendar that the Jewish people fasted historically in commemoration of Gedaliah's betrayal, one of their leaders who decided to walk in mixture, who didn't follow the prophet Jeremiah, but was influenced by the Babylonians. He was betrayed unto his destruction and the people who followed him. And it certainly looks like a second fulfillment of Gedaliah, and his people's betrayal unto destruction is manifesting before our eyes, as they suffered the full earthly consequences of not heeding God's words by the prophet Jeremiah. They chose to live in Babylonian mixture and were led to the slaughter by corrupt leadership. So the expectancy of the day of the Sabbath, the commemoration of Jesus' birth, is very high. And I was even a bit overwhelmed when I started researching this particular day once more, and the Lord led me to this beautiful image of the bride on the altar. And I certainly hope that the Sabbath is the day that we find him and we are found by him. And the brother in Christ by the name of Alex King has also done some interesting research with regard to this day. There's an article, there's a link in the article, but I'm going to put a link in the description box as well. And I particularly love the music he chose underneath his research, the song by the title Love as a Name, and his name is Jesus. So as soon as I click on at the end of this video, uploading it, I'm going to put the link by Alex's video in the description box, and I'm gonna blast that through my living room. So I hope you're gonna dance and sing unto the Lord with me, and I'm sending you much love. Bye-bye.